I still remember the chill that ran down my spine when Daniel called me into his office that Thursday afternoon. The way the fluorescent lights bounced off his polished mahogany desk. The perfectly arranged family photos that I knew were just for show. His fake smile that never reached his eyes as he gestured to the chair across from him. "Eleanor, please sit down." His voice was smooth as oil. Next to him sat Melissa from HR, clutching her tablet like a shield, her eyes refusing to meet mine. For 25 years, I'd given everything to Harrington Financial. 25 years of late nights, missed family dinners, and postponed vacations. 25 years of loyalty to a company I believed valued me. Just 3 weeks. That's all I needed to qualify for my full pension. 3 measly weeks. "We're implementing some organizational changes," Daniel said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Unfortunately, your position has been eliminated, effective immediately." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. My mouth went dry. "Eliminated? But I'm 3 weeks from my pension qualification." Daniel's expression didn't change. "The timing is unfortunate, but these decisions are based solely on business needs." Melissa finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "The severance package includes 2 months' salary and continuation of health benefits for 30 days. 2 months after 25 years, I felt my hands begin to shake. Through the glass walls of Daniel's office, I could see my coworkers pretending not to watch. "You'll need to clear out your desk today," Daniel continued, already checking his phone. "IT will monitor the process to ensure company data security." I sat frozen, my mind racing through possibilities. This wasn't random. Daniel had been gunning for me ever since I questioned those irregular expense reports 6 months ago. Now here I was, 3 weeks shy of my pension, being escorted out like a criminal. I nodded mechanically as Melissa explained the details of my separation agreement. But inside, something hardened. Something cold and determined. They thought this was over. They thought I would sign their papers, clear my desk, and disappear quietly. They had no idea what they'd just started. The drive home felt surreal. Rain pounded my windshield as I gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, my cardboard box of desk items sitting pathetically on the passenger seat. 25 years reduced to a coffee mug, some framed photos, and a dying potted plant. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter Lily. "How was work today, Mom?" My eyes stung. How could I tell her I'd lost the job that put her through college? That the retirement I'd been planning might never happen now? I walked into my empty house and collapsed onto the couch. The silence was deafening. My husband Tom had passed away 3 years ago, and now I felt his absence more acutely than ever. He would have known exactly what to say. I called my best friend Margaret. "They did what?" she exploded after I explained. "That's obviously age discrimination. You need to sue them." "It's not that simple," I sighed. "They're calling it restructuring. They eliminated 3 other positions too." "But 3 weeks before your pension? Come on, Eleanor, that's not a coincidence." She was right. Daniel had hated me ever since I'd been promoted to senior compliance officer 5 years ago. He'd wanted his golf buddy for the position. Then there were the questions I'd raised about certain expense reports, luxury hotels, first-class flights, meals at 5-star restaurants. All approved despite violating company policy. "You need to fight this," Margaret insisted. "Call a lawyer." "I don't know if I have the energy," I admitted. "Or the money." "Then what will you do?" I stared at the rain streaming down my windows, remembering the smug look on Daniel's face. How casually he'd tossed aside my 25 years of service. "I don't know yet," I said quietly, "but I'm not just going to disappear." After hanging up, I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I titled it Harrington Files. Then I began methodically downloading every email, document, and report I'd legitimately saved over the years for work purposes. Nothing confidential. I wasn't stupid. Just information I had the right to possess. My hand stopped shaking. My mind cleared. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about justice. Morning came with harsh reality. No need to set an alarm. No office to rush to. No colleagues expecting me. Just silence and the weight of uncertainty. I opened my laptop and stared at the spreadsheet I'd created. Monthly expenses, savings, possible income sources. The numbers didn't add up. My savings wouldn't last more than 6 months. The partial pension I qualified for would barely cover utilities. At 58, finding a new job wouldn't be easy. My phone rang. It was Rebecca, my former assistant at Harrington. "Eleanor, are you okay? Everyone's talking about what happened." "I'm surviving," I said, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "How are things there?" "Weird." Daniel announced they're streamlining the compliance department. "They've divided your responsibilities among 3 junior staffers. None of us know what we're doing." I wasn't surprised. Daniel had never valued proper compliance. It got in the way of his creative accounting. "Rebecca," I said carefully, "did anything unusual happen with the quarterly reports before I left?" A pause. "I shouldn't be talking about this." "I understand. Just keep your eyes open, okay?" After hanging up, I opened the Harrington Files folder on my laptop. 25 years generates a lot of data. Most was routine. Policy manuals, training materials, meeting minutes. But scattered throughout were items that had raised red flags over the years. Expense reports with missing documentation. Budget adjustments that didn't quite align with project needs. Vendor contracts with inflated costs. Individually, each discrepancy seemed minor, perhaps just sloppy bookkeeping. But together, they formed a pattern. I printed several documents and spread them across my dining table. Then I grabbed different colored highlighters and began marking similarities, connections, repeated names. After 3 hours, I sat back, my eyes burning. Several vendors appeared repeatedly in the questionable transactions. All approved by Daniel. All slightly over budget. All with vague descriptions of services. My phone pinged with an email. It was from Melissa in HR. "Final paperwork required." Attached was my severance agreement with a sticky sweet note, reminding me that I needed to sign it within 48 hours to receive my 2 months' salary. I looked at the papers spread across my table, then back at the email. They wanted me to go away quietly. That wasn't going to happen. The lawyer's office was in a modest building downtown. Martin Rodriguez had come highly recommended by a neighbor who'd gone through a wrongful termination case. "Miss Wallace," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "please, tell me what happened." I explained everything, my 25 years at Harrington, the timing of my termination, the lost pension. Martin took notes, his expression giving nothing away. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Unfortunately, what I'm hearing is all too common. Companies often find ways to eliminate older employees before they qualify for expensive benefits. So they can get away with this?" My voice cracked. "I didn't say that." He tapped his pen against his notepad. "The timing is suspicious. 3 weeks before pension vesting raises red flags, but they'll claim business necessity, and they terminated other employees too, which gives them cover." My shoulders slumped. "So there's nothing I can do?" "I didn't say that either." Martin smiled slightly. "We could file an age discrimination claim, but these cases can drag on for years with no guarantee of success." "I don't have years," I said. "I need my pension now." He nodded. "What about the financial irregularities you mentioned? Do you have documentation?" I hesitated. "Some. Nothing conclusive, just patterns that don't add up." "Be careful there," Martin warned. "If you accuse an executive of financial impropriety without solid evidence, you could face defamation charges." "So what do you suggest?" Martin thought for a moment. "Let's approach this strategically. First, I'll send a letter to Harrington requesting reconsideration of your termination based on your years of service and proximity to pension vesting. That puts them on notice, but doesn't show our full hand. And if they ignore it, then we consider next steps." He leaned forward. "Meanwhile, document everything. Any communications about your termination, any patterns you noticed. But Eleanor," his voice turned serious, "don't do anything that could be construed as accessing company systems without authorization or taking confidential information. That could backfire badly." I nodded, feeling slightly dejected. I'd hoped for a more aggressive approach. As if reading my mind, Martin added, "Sometimes the quiet path is the most effective. Be patient. Build your case carefully." Walking to my car afterward, I wondered if patience was really the answer. Daniel certainly hadn't been patient in eliminating my position. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Need to talk. Coffee tomorrow?" A flicker of hope sparked in my chest. Maybe patience would work after all. The coffee shop was crowded enough to provide privacy in plain sight. Rebecca arrived looking nervous, glancing over her shoulder before sitting down. "I can't stay long," she said, her voice low. They've been watching everyone who was close to you. What's happening? I asked, pushing a coffee toward her. Rebecca took a sip, her hands shaking slightly. Things are weird. The day after you left, Daniel brought in consultants to review compliance protocols. They've been combing through all your files. My heart raced. Looking for what? I don't know. But Daniel seems worried. He asked me if you ever mentioned concerns about the McCormick account. The McCormick account, a real estate development firm that had been a client for years. Their quarterly reports had always felt off to me. Too clean, too perfect. I'd flagged some inconsistencies for review just before my termination. What did you tell him? That I didn't know anything. Rebecca bit her lip. I brought something for you. She slid a folded paper across the table. I opened it carefully. It was a printout of an email from Daniel to the CFO, dated 1 week before my termination. Wallace's review of McCormick is becoming problematic. She's asking for original documentation we don't want to provide. Need to accelerate restructuring timeline before pension date. Confirm ASAP. My hands went cold. Here it was, proof they deliberately pushed up my termination to avoid my pension obligation. How did you get this? I was printing documents for Daniel and it was mixed in with the other papers. Rebecca looked around nervously. I shouldn't have taken it, but it seemed important. It is. I carefully folded the paper and put it in my purse. There's more? Rebecca whispered. Daniel's been moving money around, big transfers to accounts I've never seen before, and the quarterly reports, they've been altered since you left. Altered how? Expenses recategorized, revenue projections changed. I don't understand all of it, but it doesn't feel right. The coffee shop door opened and Rebecca flinched. I need to go. They think I'm at a doctor's appointment. She stood to leave, then hesitated. Be careful, Eleanor. Daniel seems scared, and scared people are dangerous. I watched her hurry out, my mind racing. The email was exactly what I needed, proof of deliberate pension avoidance. But the other information, what was Daniel hiding in those accounts? What had he changed in the reports? The answer was clear. I needed more evidence, and I knew just who might have it. James Fletcher had been Harrington's CFO for 15 years before retiring suddenly 6 months ago. He and I had never been close, but we'd respected each other as careful, by-the-book professionals in a company that increasingly valued flash over substance. Finding his address wasn't difficult. The real challenge was working up the courage to drive there. His house was modest, a small bungalow with a well-maintained garden. Not the mansion you'd expect from a recently retired CFO. That told me something already. I rang the doorbell, heart pounding. What if he slammed the door in my face? What if he called Daniel? The door opened and there stood James, looking thinner than I remembered, his silver hair unkempt. Eleanor Wallace, he said, eyes widening. I heard what happened to you. May I come in? He hesitated, then stepped aside. I suppose you're here about Daniel. His living room was cluttered with books and papers. No luxury furniture, no expensive art, just the home of a man living modestly. They pushed me out 3 weeks before my pension vested, I said, getting straight to the point. James nodded grimly. Daniel's specialty, cutting corners to boost the bottom line. Is that what happened to you? He sighed, sinking into an armchair. I didn't retire, Eleanor. I was forced out because I asked too many questions about certain financial arrangements. My pulse quickened. A McCormick account? James looked up sharply. How do you know about that? I flagged some inconsistencies just before I was terminated. Daniel panicked. James was silent for a long moment. Then he walked to a bookshelf and pulled out a thick binder. I kept records. Call it insurance. He opened the binder, revealing page after page of highlighted documents. McCormick is just the tip of the iceberg, he said quietly. Daniel's been running a sophisticated shell game for years, inflating expenses, skimming the difference, creating phantom vendor accounts that funnel money to offshore entities, small amounts each time spread across dozens of accounts. How much? By my calculations, at least $3 million over the past 5 years. I gasped. That's embezzlement. Why didn't you report it? James laughed bitterly. With what proof? Daniel was careful. The paper trail is fragmented, buried in thousands of legitimate transactions. And who would believe me over the Golden Boy CEO? He handed me the binder. But maybe they'll believe us together. I took it, hands trembling. This is a risk, James. I'm tired of being afraid, he said simply. They took my dignity, my reputation. I don't want them taking yours too. As I drove home, the binder safely hidden under the passenger seat, I felt something I hadn't felt since my termination. Hope. I had an ally. I had evidence, and now I had a plan. The next morning, I called Martin and arranged an urgent meeting. His eyes widened as I spread James's documents across his desk, along with Rebecca's email printout. This changes things, he said, examining the evidence. The email alone proves they accelerated your termination specifically to avoid pension obligations. That's illegal. And the financial documents? Martin frowned. They suggest serious impropriety, but they're still circumstantial. We'd need more direct evidence to prove fraud. Could we use this to negotiate my pension reinstatement? Possibly. But we need to be careful. Martin looked concerned. If Daniel realizes what we have, he might try to destroy evidence or pressure witnesses. He was right. Already, Rebecca was being watched. James lived in fear. If we moved too quickly, Daniel might cover his tracks completely. What do you suggest? I asked. A two-pronged approach, Martin said. First, I'll file a formal complaint with the Department of Labor regarding your pension. That creates an official record and puts legal pressure on Harrington. And second, we need more concrete evidence of financial wrongdoing. He tapped the documents. These show patterns, but we need smoking gun proof. Account numbers, transfer records, emails confirming Daniel's direct involvement. My heart sank. How do we get that? I don't have access to company systems anymore. No, Martin agreed, but James Fletcher might know who does. That evening, I called James. We need someone with current access to financial records, I explained. Someone trustworthy. James was quiet for a moment. There's Abigail Chen in accounting. She helped me compile some of those records before I left. She was troubled by what she saw. Can you contact her? It's risky, James cautioned. If Daniel suspects she's helping us. I understand, I said, but without more evidence we're stuck. James sighed. I'll reach out carefully, no promises. 3 days later, my doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was a young woman I'd seen around the office but never really spoken to. Ms. Wallace, I'm Abigail Chen. Her voice was barely audible. James said you needed help. I invited her in, noting how tense she looked, how her eyes darted around as if expecting to be followed. I've been documenting things, she said once we were seated at my dining table. Transactions that don't make sense. Vendors that don't seem to exist. She pulled a flash drive from her purse. Everything's here. Account numbers, transfer dates, approval signatures. She placed it on the table between us. Daniel's signature is on everything. I stared at the tiny drive. Why are you risking this? Abigail's expression hardened. Because last year, my mother lost her pension when her company suddenly declared bankruptcy. It destroyed her. I won't let it happen to someone else if I can help it. As she left, Abigail turned back. Be careful with that information. I encrypted it, but if Daniel finds out... She didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew the stakes. That night, I examined the files on Abigail's drive. Account statements, transfer authorizations, emails between Daniel and unknown partners discussing distribution of proceeds. It was all there. The evidence we needed. The next morning, I called Martin. I think we have our smoking gun. Martin's office was quiet as he reviewed Abigail's files. His expression grew increasingly serious. This is definitive evidence of embezzlement, he said finally. The question is, what do we do with it? I'd been pondering that very question all night. Going directly to the board might not work. Daniel has them wrapped around his finger. The SEC would be interested, Martin suggested. This level of financial manipulation falls under their jurisdiction. But that could take months, even years, I countered. Meanwhile, I'm still without my pension, and Daniel continues stealing from the company. Martin leaned back in his chair. What about Gerald Harrington? Gerald Harrington, the company founder and chairman emeritus. He'd stepped back from day-to-day operations years ago, but still held significant influence and ownership. He might not even see me, I said doubtfully. Daniel has probably poisoned that well already. Maybe, Martin agreed. But Gerald built that company from nothing. He values loyalty and integrity. If anyone would be disturbed by what Daniel's doing, it's him. I considered this. Gerald had always treated me with respect during his active years. He'd personally congratulated me on my 15 and 20-year anniversaries. I'll try to arrange a meeting, I decided, but we should prepare for resistance. That afternoon, I called Gerald's personal assistant, a woman who'd been with him for decades. To my surprise, she put me through immediately. Eleanor, Gerald's gruff voice greeted me. Heard what happened. Damned shame. My throat tightened. Mr. Harrington, I need to speak with you privately. It's important. A pause. This about Daniel? Yes, sir. Another pause. My house, tomorrow 10 a.m. Come to the back door. The line went dead before I could respond. That night, I prepared carefully, organizing the evidence into a clear, concise presentation. No emotional appeals, just facts Gerald couldn't ignore. The next morning, I drove to the affluent neighborhood where Gerald lived. His house was impressive, but not ostentatious, like the man himself. Following his instructions, I went to the back door. It opened before I could knock. Gerald Harrington stood there, still imposing at 82. Come in quickly. Don't want the neighbors gossiping. He led me to a wood-paneled study and closed the door. Now, he said, settling into a leather chair, tell me what my CEO has done. For the next hour, I laid out everything. My termination just before pension vesting, the suspicious transactions, the offshore accounts, the altered reports. I showed him emails, account statements, transfer records. Gerald's expression darkened with each revelation. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. I handpicked that boy, he said finally, his voice heavy with disappointment. Thought he had integrity. The evidence suggests otherwise, I said gently. Gerald nodded slowly. My company, my responsibility. He looked up, eyes suddenly sharp. What do you want, Eleanor? Justice, I answered honestly. My pension restored, and Daniel held accountable. The pension I can fix with one phone call, Gerald said. Daniel, that requires more finesse. If this becomes public, the company suffers. I understand that, I assured him. I don't want to harm the company or its employees. Gerald studied me, then nodded once. Leave this with me. Don't speak to anyone else about it for now. As he showed me out, he added, Eleanor, be careful. Daniel won't go down without a fight. Driving home, I felt both relieved and anxious. Gerald had seemed genuinely disturbed by the evidence. But would he really act against Daniel, his chosen successor? My phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Eleanor Wallace? A male voice asked. Yes. Who's this? Someone who knows what you're doing. Stop now, or you'll regret it. The line went dead. My hands shook as I set down the phone. They knew. The game had just become much more dangerous. I barely slept that night, jumping at every creak in the house. The anonymous call had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Was it Daniel? One of his allies? How much did they know about what I was doing? In the morning, my doorbell rang. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. Rebecca stood on my porch, looking distraught. They fired me, she blurted as soon as I opened the door. No warning, no explanation, just escorted me out. I ushered her inside. Did they say why? Restructuring needs, she quoted bitterly. Same excuse they used for you. But Daniel pulled me aside and whispered, Tell Eleanor to back off. My blood ran cold. They were targeting people connected to me. I'm so sorry, Rebecca. This is my fault. No, she said firmly, it's Daniel's fault, and I'm done being scared. She pulled out her phone. Before I left, I took photos of some documents on Daniel's desk, meeting notes about something called Project Phoenix. The photos showed handwritten notes outlining a plan to restructure company assets before a transition event. Names of offshore banks, amounts in the millions. He's planning to drain the company, I realized aloud. Set up fall guys, then disappear with the money. Rebecca nodded grimly. And guess who's positioned to take the blame? Former CFO James Fletcher, whose signature is mysteriously appearing on documents he never signed. James needs to know, I said, reaching for my phone. No answer. I tried again, still nothing. We should check on him, Rebecca suggested, looking worried. 30 minutes later, we pulled up to James's house. Something felt off immediately. The front door was slightly ajar. Mail had accumulated in the box. James? I called, pushing the door open cautiously. It's Eleanor. Silence. The living room was a disaster. Papers scattered everywhere, furniture overturned. Someone had ransacked the place. He's gone, Rebecca whispered. A neighbor appeared at the open door. Are you friends of Mr. Fletcher? Police were here yesterday. Said he had some kind of accident. My heart raced. What kind of accident? Car went off the road. He's in Memorial Hospital, intensive care. Rebecca and I exchanged alarmed glances. This was no accident. At the hospital, we were told James was in critical condition. Broken ribs, punctured lung, head trauma. No visitors except family, the nurse said firmly. Outside, in the hospital parking lot, I leaned against my car, feeling sick. They tried to kill him, Rebecca nodded, face pale. And they'll come for us next. We need to move faster, I decided. No more waiting for Gerald to act. What are you thinking? I took a deep breath. We take everything we have, your photos, Abigail's files, James's documents, straight to the FBI. Rebecca's eyes widened. That's a nuclear option, once that starts. I know, but people are getting hurt now. James could die. We drove straight to the local FBI field office. After explaining the situation to 3 different agents, we were finally introduced to Special Agent Diane Mercer. Financial crimes aren't usually this violent, she observed, reviewing our evidence. This suggests serious desperation. Will you investigate? I asked. Agent Mercer nodded slowly. We have enough here to open a case, but corporate fraud investigations are complex. It could take weeks just to get warrants. We may not have weeks, I said urgently. Project Phoenix is happening soon. I'll expedite things, she promised. Meanwhile, you both need to be extremely careful. Stay somewhere unexpected. Don't use credit cards or phones that could be traced. As we left the FBI office, Rebecca turned to me. Where do we go now? I thought for a moment. I have a place, somewhere Daniel would never think to look. My late husband's fishing cabin was hardly luxury accommodation, but it was secluded and paid for in cash years ago. No paper trail connecting it to me. Perfect for lying low. Rebecca and I stopped at a grocery store for supplies, paying cash. I bought a prepaid phone while we were there. No calls on our regular phones that might be traced. The cabin was dusty but secure. We spent that evening reviewing everything we knew, organizing evidence, and planning our next steps. The FBI will move carefully, I explained. We need a faster option? What about the media? Rebecca suggested. A whistleblower story might force action. Too risky without ironclad proof, I countered. Daniel would sue for defamation, and the company's lawyers would bury us. My prepaid phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Eleanor? It's Melissa from HR. My guard went up immediately. How did you get this number? Rebecca told her sister, who told me. Melissa sounded frightened. Listen, I need to warn you. They know you went to the FBI. Daniel's destroying evidence right now. My heart sank. How? Server wipes, shredding parties, altered backups. They're working all night. By morning, most of your proof will be gone. I glanced at Rebecca, whose face had gone pale. What about Project Phoenix? A pause. It's happening tomorrow. Emergency board meeting at 3 p.m. to approve the final transfers. After that, Daniel leaves for the Cayman Islands. After hanging up, I relayed the information to Rebecca. We need to call Agent Mercer, she said immediately. I shook my head. Even if she believes us, the FBI can't get warrants that quickly. By tomorrow afternoon, it'll be too late. So what do we do? Rebecca asked desperately. I stared out the cabin window at the darkening forest. We need to stop the board meeting. How? We can't just walk in there. Security would stop us. Not if we're invited, I said slowly, an idea forming. Gerald Harrington can bring guests to any company meeting. It's in the bylaws. Rebecca looked doubtful. Will he help us? He might be in on it. I don't think so. I picked up the prepaid phone, but we're about to find out. Getting Gerald's private number wasn't easy, but his loyal assistant provided it after I explained the urgency. When I finally reached him, his voice was guarded. Eleanor, where are you? Somewhere safe, I answered. Mr. Harrington, Daniel is destroying evidence and planning to drain company accounts tomorrow. There's an emergency board meeting at 3 p.m. A long pause. I know about the meeting. Daniel says it's to address liquidity concerns. It's to approve final transfers for Project Phoenix, I countered, after which he disappears with millions while the company collapses. Another pause. You have proof of this? Yes, but I need your help to present it to the board before they vote. Daniel would never allow you in that meeting. No, I agreed, but you could bring me as your guest. It's your right as chairman emeritus. Gerald was silent for so long I thought we'd lost the connection. Finally, back entrance of headquarters, 2:30 p.m. I'll have a security badge waiting. After hanging up, I turned to Rebecca. We're in, but we need to be ready for anything. That night, we prepared meticulously, organizing evidence, rehearsing our presentation, planning for various scenarios. If we failed, Harrington Financial would collapse, hundreds would lose their jobs, and Daniel would escape with millions. Morning came too quickly. We gathered our materials and drove back to the city, constantly checking to ensure we weren't followed. As we approached Harrington headquarters, I felt a strange calm. 25 years had led to this moment. Not just for my pension, not just for justice, but for everyone Daniel had hurt along the way. It was time to end his reign. The back entrance to Harrington headquarters was unassuming, a simple door marked deliveries only. Gerald's assistant waited there, looking nervous. "Mr. Harrington is already upstairs," she whispered, handing us visitor badges. "Use the service elevator. He'll meet you on the executive floor." The service elevator was cramped and smelled of cleaning supplies. As we rode up, Rebecca squeezed my hand. "Are you scared?" she asked quietly. "Terrified," I admitted, but also ready. The elevator opened directly into a service hallway. Gerald stood waiting, looking grim in an expensive suit. "The board is assembling," he said without preamble. "Daniel is already laying groundwork about necessary financial restructuring to protect the company." "How many board members?" I asked. 7, plus Daniel. "Most are his allies, but they're not criminals. Show them clear evidence of fraud, and they'll turn on him." We followed Gerald through the back corridors, avoiding the main hallways where we might be recognized. The boardroom was just ahead when Daniel's assistant rounded the corner. Her eyes widened. "Mr. Harrington and Eleanor Wallace?" Gerald stepped forward smoothly. "Miss Wallace is here at my request. Board business." The assistant looked uncertain. "I should inform Mr. Winters." "That won't be necessary," Gerald said firmly. "I'm still chairman emeritus of this company." She hesitated, then nodded and continued down the hall, glancing back nervously. "She'll tell him," Rebecca whispered. "Good," Gerald said. "Let him sweat." The boardroom was imposing, all dark wood and leather chairs surrounding a massive table. 5 board members were already seated, reviewing documents and sipping water. They looked up in surprise as we entered. "Gerald," one elderly man greeted. "Unexpected pleasure. And who are your guests?" Before Gerald could answer, the door burst open. Daniel stormed in, his face flushed with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, glaring at me. "This woman is no longer employed by Harrington Financial. She has no business in a confidential board meeting." Gerald stepped forward. "I invited her, Daniel, as is my right. Whatever grievance Miss Wallace has about her termination, the boardroom isn't the place." "This isn't about my termination," I interrupted, my voice stronger than I expected. "This is about fraud, embezzlement, and the imminent collapse of Harrington Financial." The room went silent. Board members exchanged concerned glances. Daniel forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous. Gerald, I respect you, but bringing a disgruntled ex-employee to make wild accusations." "They're not wild," Gerald cut in. "I've seen the evidence, and the board will see it too." Daniel's face hardened. "This meeting is about urgent liquidity measures. We don't have time for distractions." "Interesting you should mention liquidity," I said, opening my folder. "Let's talk about Project Phoenix." Daniel went pale. The board chairman leaned forward. "What is Project Phoenix?" I placed documents on the table. "A systematic plan to drain company assets, blame former executives, and disappear with approximately $13.4 million. "This is slander," Daniel sputtered. "I'll sue you for defamation." "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation," I replied calmly, "and I have the truth right here." For the next 20 minutes, Rebecca and I presented our evidence. Account statements, transfer records, Daniel's own emails, the Project Phoenix timeline. With each revelation, the board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to shock to anger. Daniel attempted to interrupt several times, but the board chairman silenced him. "Let them finish." When we concluded, the room was deathly quiet. Finally, the chairman spoke. "Daniel, what do you have to say about these allegations?" Daniel's composure had completely unraveled. This is a conspiracy. Fletcher manipulated those records. Wallace is bitter about her termination. They're working together to ruin me. James Fletcher is in intensive care," I said quietly, "after his car accident." The chairman's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I said carefully. I'm stating facts. James Fletcher is in the hospital after questioning financial irregularities, and I have sworn statements from multiple employees documenting evidence destruction happening right now. The board chairman turned to Gerald. You've reviewed these allegations? Gerald nodded gravely. I have. They're credible and deeply disturbing. Daniel slammed his fist on the table. This is a coup. Gerald never accepted my leadership. He's using Wallace to undermine me and regain control. That's enough, Daniel, the chairman said sharply. These accusations warrant immediate investigation. Investigation? Daniel laughed bitterly. While the company faces a liquidity crisis, we need immediate action on these transfers. A female board member spoke up. What transfers exactly? Your proposal mentioned strategic reorganization of assets. Perhaps you should explain exactly what you're proposing. Daniel's eyes darted around the room. I could almost see the calculations happening behind them. He was cornered but not defeated. Fine, he said, suddenly calm. I'll address each allegation specifically. He reached for his briefcase. I have documentation that will disprove everything. As he opened his briefcase, I noticed a plane ticket peeking out. Cayman Islands, departing that evening. Exactly as Melissa had warned. Daniel pulled out a folder. First, regarding Project Phoenix. This was a legitimate restructuring plan to protect company assets during uncertain market conditions. Nothing nefarious. Then why does this memo indicate funds being transferred to personally controlled accounts? The chairman asked, holding up one of our documents. Daniel's face twitched. That document is fabricated. It has your signature, Gerald pointed out. Forged, Daniel insisted. This is all an elaborate setup. A quiet knock interrupted us. The door opened to reveal Agent Mercer, flanked by 2 other FBI agents. Daniel Winters, she asked, though she clearly knew who he was. Daniel went rigid. Who are you? This is a private meeting. Agent Mercer showed her badge. FBI. We have a warrant to seize financial records related to offshore transactions and suspected fraud at Harrington Financial. This is outrageous, Daniel sputtered. You can't just barge in. Actually, we can, Agent Mercer replied coolly. We also have a warrant for your arrest on suspicion of wire fraud, embezzlement, and financial manipulation. The board members watched in stunned silence as one agent moved toward Daniel. In an instant, Daniel's composure shattered. He lunged for the door, shoving the agent aside. Rebecca moved quickly, sticking out her foot. Daniel tumbled forward, crashing into a potted plant. The second agent was on him immediately, handcuffing him as he struggled. This won't stick, Daniel shouted as they pulled him to his feet. I'll have the best lawyers. You'll regret this, Wallace. After Daniel was escorted out, Agent Mercer addressed the board. We'll need to interview each of you. This investigation is just beginning. The chairman nodded, still looking shell-shocked. We'll cooperate fully. He turned to me. Miss Wallace, I believe the board owes you an apology. And more importantly, your full pension benefits. Relief washed over me. After weeks of anxiety and fear, it was finally over. Daniel was facing justice. My pension would be restored. As we left the boardroom, Gerald squeezed my shoulder. Well done, Eleanor. I should have paid more attention to what was happening under my nose. We all should have, I admitted. But it's not too late to fix things. Outside, reporters had already gathered, somehow tipped off about the FBI raid. Camera flashes popped as Daniel was led to a waiting car. Our 25-year history had come full circle. The man who had dismissed me so callously was now being dismissed himself, in handcuffs. Rebecca grabbed my arm excitedly. We did it, I nodded, watching Daniel's car pull away. Yes, I said quietly, we did. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The FBI investigation expanded rapidly, uncovering far more than even I had suspected. Daniel's fraud wasn't limited to Harrington Financial. He'd been involved in similar schemes at 2 previous companies. The board appointed an interim CEO and began the painful process of financial recovery. True to their word, they immediately reinstated my full pension and even offered a settlement for the emotional distress I'd suffered. James Fletcher improved slowly in the hospital. Though the police couldn't prove Daniel's direct involvement in his accident, the timing was suspicious enough that they kept investigating. Abigail Chen was promoted to head of a new financial oversight committee, tasked with building stronger safeguards against future fraud. And Rebecca? She was offered her job back with a raise, but declined. I'm thinking of becoming a financial fraud investigator, she told me over coffee. I discovered I have a talent for it. I smiled, thinking how this painful experience had revealed strengths in all of us we never knew we had. 1 month after Daniel's arrest, Gerald Harrington invited me to lunch at his country club. He looked more energized than I'd seen him in years. The company's stabilizing, he reported. The board managed to recover most of the money Daniel had moved offshore. They're implementing new compliance protocols that would have made such fraud impossible. Better late than never, I remarked. Gerald nodded thoughtfully. Eleanor, I've been thinking about your role in all this. You showed remarkable courage and intelligence, the kind of leadership Harrington Financial needs right now. I nearly choked on my water. Are you suggesting? The board is looking for a new chief compliance officer, someone with impeccable ethics and the backbone to stand up to pressure. Gerald smiled. I've recommended you. Me? After everything that happened? Because of everything that happened, Gerald corrected. Who better to prevent future fraud than the person who uncovered this one? I sat back, stunned. Return to Harrington? The idea seemed absurd after all I'd been through. Yet part of me was intrigued. I knew the company inside and out. I could help rebuild it the right way. I'll need time to think about it, I said finally. Gerald nodded. Of course, the position is yours if you want it. No pressure. As I drove home, I pondered my options. I had my pension secured. I could retire comfortably as planned. But the offer challenged me. Could I help transform a damaged company into something better? My phone rang. Martin Rodriguez calling with updates. Daniel's been denied bail, he reported. The judge considered him a flight risk. No surprise there, I said, remembering the Cayman Islands ticket. The prosecutor is offering a plea deal, but Daniel's refusing. He still thinks he can beat this. I shook my head. Even facing overwhelming evidence, Daniel's arrogance remained intact. There's something else, Martin added. The FBI found evidence that Daniel was specifically targeting employees nearing pension eligibility. You weren't the only one. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. How many? At least 12 over the past 3 years, all terminated within months of vesting. My mind reeled. 12 lives disrupted, 12 retirements jeopardized, all to pad the company's bottom line and increase Daniel's bonus. In that moment, my decision crystallized. I would accept Gerald's offer, not for myself, but for all those who had been hurt and all those who might be protected in the future. When I got home, I called Gerald. I'll take the job, I said without preamble, but I have conditions. Name them, Gerald replied. Full audit of all terminations under Daniel's leadership, restoration of benefits to anyone unfairly dismissed, and complete autonomy for the compliance department. Done, Gerald agreed without hesitation. When can you start? I thought about Daniel sitting in a jail cell, his career and reputation in ruins. I thought about my colleagues who had stood by me. I thought about the company I had served faithfully for 25 years. Monday, I said. I'll start Monday. Monday morning felt surreal. Walking into Harrington headquarters not as a disgraced ex-employee, but as the new chief compliance officer gave me a strange mix of emotions. Pride, vindication, but also lingering anger. The security guard who had escorted me out just weeks earlier now nodded respectfully. Welcome back, Miss Wallace. My new office, Daniel's old office, had been completely redecorated. No trace remained of his pretentious art or status symbols. Instead, the walls were bare, the desk clean and functional. A fresh start. Melissa from HR was my first visitor, looking sheepish. I brought your personnel file. She's placing a folder on my desk. And I wanted to apologize. I should have done more when they terminated you. I studied her for a moment. You warned me about Project Phoenix. That took courage. She nodded slightly. Not enough courage, too late. But I'm trying to do better. That's all any of us can do, I said. Now tell me about these other terminated employees. Melissa sat down, and together we reviewed the files of every employee dismissed during Daniel's tenure. The pattern was clear. Older workers, approaching benefit milestones, suddenly found redundant or underperforming. I want meetings scheduled with each of them, I instructed. We need to make this right. Over the next few days, I immersed myself in rebuilding Harrington's compliance systems. Every suspicious transaction was reviewed, every questionable policy examined. I assembled a team of people I trusted, Not yes men, but professionals with integrity and courage. One afternoon, Gerald stopped by my office. "The board is impressed," he said, settling into a chair across from me. "You've accomplished more in a week than most executives do in a month." "There's still a lot to fix," I replied, gesturing to the stacks of files. Gerald nodded thoughtfully. "The damage goes deeper than finances. Employee trust is shattered. Many are afraid they'll be the next ones pushed out." "I know," I acknowledged. "That's why I've implemented the new termination review process. No one gets dismissed without a thorough, documented review by a committee, not just their direct supervisor." "Good," Gerald approved. "And what about Daniel's allies?" Several executives were clearly helping him. This was the thornier question. Some of Daniel's team had been actively complicit in his fraud. Others had simply looked the other way. Drawing the line between willful participation and fearful silence wasn't easy. "We're investigating each one," I assured him. "Those who participated in illegal activities will face consequences. Those who merely failed to speak up will receive ethics training and closer supervision." Gerald seemed satisfied. As he stood to leave, he paused. "You know, Eleanor, I've been thinking about what allowed Daniel to get away with this for so long." "A culture of fear," I suggested. "People were afraid to question him." "Yes," Gerald agreed. "But also a culture that valued appearance over substance, quarterly profits over long-term integrity. It's not enough to catch bad actors. We need to change what we value as a company." His words stayed with me long after he left. He was right. Daniel hadn't operated in a vacuum. He'd thrived in a system that rewarded short-term results and punished those who raised concerns. That evening, as I was preparing to leave, Rebecca called. "Have you seen the news?" she asked excitedly. I hadn't. Between meetings and document reviews, I'd barely had time to breathe. "Daniel's lawyers are negotiating a plea deal," Rebecca continued. "The prosecutors have too much evidence. He's finally admitting guilt." A weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying suddenly lifted. Daniel's admission meant no long trial, no need for us to testify, no chance for him to escape justice on a technicality. "There's more," Rebecca added. "They found offshore accounts with over $20 million, way more than we thought he'd stolen." I sank into my chair, stunned. 20 million. How long had this been going on? How many people had been hurt to feed Daniel's greed? "Are you okay?" Rebecca asked after my long silence. "Yes," I said, finding my voice. "Just processing." After hanging up, I sat in my quiet office watching the sunset through the windows. I thought about how close Daniel had come to getting away with everything. If I had accepted my termination quietly, if I hadn't connected with James and Abigail, if Rebecca hadn't been brave enough to help. The company phone on my desk rang, interrupting my thoughts. Probably another crisis needing attention. "Eleanor Wallace," I answered. "Miss Wallace," a male voice responded. "This is Brian Miller with the New York Times. I'm working on a story about corporate whistleblowers. Would you be willing to share your experience exposing fraud at Harrington Financial?" I hesitated. My story could help others facing similar situations, but it could also further damage the company's reputation when we were trying to rebuild. "I'll need to think about it," I said finally. "This isn't just my story." After hanging up, I stared at the phone, contemplating what my next chapter might look like. Chief Compliance Officer, potential whistleblower spokesperson, champion for corporate ethics. None of these roles had been in my retirement plan. But then again, sometimes life's most meaningful paths are the ones we never expected to walk. The New York Times article appeared 2 weeks later, after careful coordination with Harrington's PR team. The headline read, "The Accountant Who Couldn't Be Silenced. How One Woman's Stand Exposed $1 Million Fraud." The piece was balanced, detailing Daniel's crimes and my role in exposing them, while also highlighting Harrington's swift corrective actions. The board's decision to appoint me as Chief Compliance Officer was presented as evidence of the company's commitment to reform. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My email inbox flooded with messages from employees at other companies facing similar situations. Some shared stories of retaliation they'd suffered after reporting misconduct. Others asked for advice on documenting suspicious activities. Overnight, I became the reluctant face of corporate whistleblowing. "You should write a book," Rebecca suggested over lunch. "Or do a TED Talk. People need to hear this story. I shook my head. I'm not looking for fame. It's not about fame, she insisted. It's about impact. How many other Daniels are out there right now targeting employees like you? How many people are afraid to speak up? She had a point. But my focus remained on rebuilding Harrington. We were making progress, implementing new financial controls, creating anonymous reporting channels, conducting ethics training. Most significantly, we had contacted all 12 employees who had been terminated before pension vesting. 10 agreed to settlements, including full pension restoration. The other 2 had already filed lawsuits, which we decided not to contest. One morning, I received a call from the hospital. James Fletcher was finally being discharged. I offered to pick him up, feeling we owed him that much at least. James looked frailer than I remembered, leaning on a cane as he made his way to my car. But his eyes were clear and determined. Heard you're running compliance now, he said as I drove him home. Good choice, you always had integrity. We couldn't have stopped Daniel without your documentation, I reminded him. James nodded slowly. Years of watching, noticing patterns, keeping records. Sometimes I thought I was being paranoid. You weren't, I assured him. You were being vigilant. We drove in silence for a few minutes before James spoke again. They offered me a consulting position, you know. The board wants my help identifying vulnerabilities in the financial systems. I glanced at him, surprised. Are you going to take it? A small smile crossed his face. Already did. Start next week part-time. Turns out retirement didn't suit me after all. I laughed. Looks like we're both getting second acts we never expected. At his house, I helped James inside. The place had been cleaned up. No more scattered papers or overturned furniture. Fresh flowers sat on the coffee table. The company arranged for housekeeping while I was in the hospital, James explained. Part of their apology, I suppose. After making sure he had everything he needed, I prepared to leave. At the door, James stopped me. Eleanor, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. All those weeks investigating Daniel, gathering evidence, risking your safety, was it worth it? I considered his question carefully. The stress, the fear, the uncertainty, had it been worth it for justice and my pension? Yes, I said finally. Not just for the money, though that was important, but because it was right, because no one should get away with what he did. James nodded, satisfied. That's what I thought you'd say. That's why they're lucky to have you now. As I drove back to the office, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few months, from terminated employee to compliance executive, from victim to change agent. My phone rang, the board chairman calling about next week's meeting. Another crisis, another challenge, another opportunity to build something better from the ashes of what Daniel had nearly destroyed. I answered with newfound confidence, ready for whatever came next. Daniel's sentencing hearing fell on a rainy Tuesday. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching the man who had so casually dismissed me now standing before a judge, head bowed in feigned remorse. The prosecutor outlined the charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, tax evasion. The total stolen, $23.7 million over 7 years. The victims, not just Harrington Financial, but its employees, shareholders, and clients. Daniel's attorney painted him as a dedicated executive who had made errors in judgment due to extreme pressure. He cited Daniel's previously clean record, his community involvement, his family. Then Daniel himself spoke, voice carefully modulated to sound contrite. I deeply regret my actions, he said, never looking in my direction. I lost sight of my ethical obligations in pursuit of company growth. I've disappointed many people, including myself. I nearly laughed out loud at his performance. Even now, facing prison, he couldn't admit he'd acted out of pure greed. The judge wasn't fooled either. Her voice was steel as she delivered the sentence. 12 years in federal prison, restitution of all stolen funds, and a lifetime ban from serving as an officer in any publicly traded company. Mr. Winters, she concluded, you abused your position of trust, enriched yourself at others' expense, and showed callous disregard for those who depended on you. This sentence reflects not just the financial damage you caused, but the human cost as well. As Daniel was led away in handcuffs, our eyes met briefly. I saw no remorse there, only cold anger. Even now, he blamed me for his downfall, not his own actions. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered around me. Miss Wallace, How do you feel about the sentence? Do you think justice was served? Will this change corporate culture? I considered my words carefully, aware that my response would be quoted in business publications across the country. Justice was served today, I said finally. But this case represents a broader problem. Financial crimes aren't victimless. Real people lose jobs, pensions, and security. We need systems that prevent fraud, not just punish it after the fact. Back at Harrington, I found a small celebration underway in the break room. Employees had brought in cupcakes and coffee, marking the closure of the Daniel chapter. Speech, someone called when I entered. I shook my head, embarrassed by the attention. No speech. Just a reminder that what we're building now matters. Every policy, every safeguard, every ethical decision shapes who we are as a company. That afternoon, I met with the board to discuss long-term compliance strategy. The Daniel crisis had created an opportunity for real change, and I was determined not to waste it. We need to address the root causes, I explained, distributing my proposal. Not just the specific mechanisms Daniel exploited, but the culture that enabled him. My plan was comprehensive. Revised compensation structures that rewarded long-term value over quarterly profits, protected reporting channels for employees who identified concerns, regular external audits of executive expenses, mandatory ethics training at all levels. This is extensive. One board member commented, flipping through the document. And expensive, another added. Less expensive than fraud, I countered. Daniel's actions cost this company over $20 million, not counting legal fees, reputation damage, and lost business. Gerald, who had attended as an observer, spoke up. Eleanor is right. These aren't just nice-to-have policies. They're essential safeguards. The board chairman nodded slowly. I agree. We can't afford another Daniel. The question is implementation. Some of these changes will meet resistance. Change always does, I acknowledged. But we have a unique moment right now. Employees have seen the consequences of poor oversight. They'll support reforms if we explain why they matter. By the end of the meeting, my proposal was approved with minor modifications. As we filed out, Gerald pulled me aside. You've accomplished something remarkable here, he said. Not just catching Daniel, but creating lasting change. I smiled, feeling a sense of completion I hadn't experienced in months. Daniel was facing justice, my pension was secure, and Harrington was transforming into the company it should have been all along. That evening, I visited my husband's grave, something I hadn't done since before my termination. I sat on the small bench beside his headstone, feeling his presence as I often did in quiet moments. I did it, Tom, I said softly. I fought back. I think you would have been proud. The gentle breeze that rustled the cemetery trees felt like his answer. 6 months into my role as Chief Compliance Officer, Harrington Financial had been transformed. Our new policies were fully implemented. Employee trust was slowly rebuilding. The financial damage from Daniel's fraud had been largely contained. The media spotlight had moved on to newer scandals, giving us space to complete our reforms without constant scrutiny. James Fletcher's consulting work had strengthened our financial controls. The board had become more engaged in oversight. Most satisfying of all, our 12 reinstated pension recipients were finally enjoying the retirements they had earned. I'd received heartfelt thank you letters from several, including one man who wrote, "You fought not just for yourself, but for all of us who couldn't fight back." That letter now sat framed on my desk, a daily reminder of why my work mattered. My phone rang, Rebecca calling with exciting news. "I got accepted to the forensic accounting program," she exclaimed. "Classes start next month." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. Rebecca had discovered her passion through our investigation, deciding to pursue fraud detection professionally. "I couldn't have done it without you," she continued. "Your recommendation letter made all the difference." "Nonsense. You earned this on your own merit." After catching up on her plans, I hung up feeling proud of her new direction. So many lives had been changed by Daniel's crimes, some for the worse, but others in unexpected positive ways. My assistant knocked, then entered with a concerned expression. "Miss Wallace, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." "Who is it?" "Caroline Winters, Daniel's wife." I froze. I'd never met Caroline, though I'd seen her in court during Daniel's sentencing. What could she possibly want from me? Send her in, I decided after a moment. Caroline Winters entered cautiously. She was elegant but tired-looking, her designer clothes hanging loosely on her thin frame. The strain of the past months showed clearly on her face. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, taking the seat I offered. "I know this is unusual. How can I help you, Mrs. Winters?" I kept my tone professional, unsure of her intentions. She clasped her hands tightly in her lap. "I wanted to apologize for what Daniel did to you, to everyone. This was unexpected. You have nothing to apologize for. You weren't involved in his crimes." "Wasn't I?" she asked bitterly. "I enjoyed the houses, the cars, the vacations, all paid for with stolen money. I never questioned where it came from." I studied her more carefully. The expensive watch, the designer purse, remnants of her former lifestyle. But there was something genuine in her distress. "Daniel was deliberately deceptive," I said gently. "He fooled a lot of people." Caroline shook her head. "I should have known. There were signs, late-night phone calls, secret bank accounts, his insistence that I never ask about business." She looked up, eyes damp. "The truth is, I didn't want to know. It was easier to just enjoy the benefits." Her honesty was disarming. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm trying to make amends. I've sold the houses, the artwork, everything of value. I'm cooperating with authorities to return as much money as possible to Harrington." I nodded, impressed by her integrity. "That can't be easy." "It's necessary," she said simply. "I'm starting over. New job, new apartment, new life." As she stood to leave, Caroline hesitated. "There's one more thing. Daniel kept files on everyone he considered a threat, including you. After his arrest, I found them and turned everything over to the FBI. But there was something you should know." She placed a folder on my desk. "Daniel had been planning your termination for over a year. He waited deliberately until just before your pension vested to maximize the financial impact." I stared at the folder, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. "Why would he do that?" "Because you questioned his expense reports 3 years ago," Caroline explained. "He never forgot that. He called it his special project, making sure you lost your pension." The revelation stunned me. Daniel's vendetta had been even more calculated than I'd realized. He hadn't just seized an opportunity to cut costs. He'd planned my financial devastation meticulously, patiently, vindictively. After Caroline left, I sat for a long time, processing this new information. Daniel's cruelty had been deliberate, personal, and premeditated. In a strange way, knowing this made me more certain I'd done the right thing in exposing him. That evening, I walked through the quiet office, looking at the changes we'd implemented. New reporting systems, transparent financial tracking, protected whistleblower channels. Daniel had intended to destroy my future. Instead, he had inadvertently given me a new purpose, ensuring no one else suffered as I nearly had. Sometimes, justice takes unexpected forms. 1 year to the day after my termination, I stood at a podium in Harrington's largest conference room, addressing employees about our ethics program progress. The room was packed, not just with staff, but with board members, industry representatives, and even a few reporters. "Compliance isn't just about rules," I explained. "It's about culture. About creating an environment where ethical behavior is recognized and rewarded, where people feel safe raising concerns." From the back of the room, Gerald Harrington nodded approvingly. At 83, he had become more involved with the company again, mentoring younger staff and championing our reforms. After my presentation, we unveiled a new initiative, the Harrington Integrity Scholarship, providing education funds for children of employees. It was my way of giving back, of ensuring something positive emerged from the Daniel crisis. The reception afterward was lively, with employees from different departments mingling over coffee and pastries. Junior staff now felt comfortable approaching executives with ideas. The hierarchical walls Daniel had built were slowly crumbling. Abigail Chen, now heading our financial review team, stopped by to chat. "The new reconciliation system caught its first discrepancy yesterday," she reported proudly. "Nothing malicious, just an accounting error, but it would have gone unnoticed under the old system." "That's exactly what it's designed to do," I said, pleased. "Catch small issues before they become big problems." "Speaking of problems," Abigail lowered her voice, "did you see the news about Grey Tech Industries? I hadn't been focused on our event. Their CEO just resigned amid fraud allegations, she continued. Sounds a lot like our situation. Financial manipulation, retaliation against whistleblowers, the works. My interest piqued. Anyone stepping forward to expose it? That's the problem, Abigail sighed. Several employees raised concerns internally but were ignored or silenced. By the time regulators got involved, the damage was done. I felt a familiar stirring, the same determination that had driven me to stand up to Daniel. Gray Tech employees needed guidance from someone who'd navigated similar waters. Later that day, I contacted Martin Rodriguez to discuss possibilities. Could we create some kind of support network for corporate whistleblowers? A resource center with legal advice, emotional support, practical guidance? It's needed, Martin agreed. Most people don't know their rights or how to document concerns properly. They act in isolation, making themselves vulnerable. We sketched out a plan, a nonprofit organization, independent of Harrington, but supported by ethical companies, dedicated to helping employees report misconduct safely and effectively. This could be your next chapter, Martin suggested. You have credibility no consultant or lawyer could match. You've lived it. The idea was appealing. My work at Harrington was increasingly stable, the systems functioning well. Perhaps it was time to expand my impact beyond one company. That evening, I drafted a proposal for the board, requesting permission to represent Harrington in establishing this new organization. My phone rang just as I was finishing, James Fletcher calling. Eleanor, turn on channel 6 right now. I did, and saw Daniel's face on screen. The news anchor was reporting, former CEO Daniel Winters was attacked in federal prison today during a confrontation with another inmate. Winters suffered minor injuries and has been moved to a separate facility for his safety. I felt no satisfaction at Daniel's misfortune, only a complicated mix of emotions. His life had unraveled completely, reputation destroyed, fortune confiscated, freedom lost, now physically threatened. It was justice, but it still left me hollow. James seemed to sense my mood. You're not responsible for his choices, Eleanor. He made his own bed. I know, I sighed. It's just sobering to see how far he's fallen. Focus on how far you've risen, James countered. That's the real story here. He was right. What mattered wasn't Daniel's downfall, but the positive changes that had emerged from the crisis he created. Stronger corporate governance, better employee protections, and now, potentially, a new resource for whistleblowers facing similar situations. The next morning, I presented my proposal to the board. Their response was unanimously supportive. Harrington should lead on corporate ethics, the chairman declared. This initiative positions us as reformers rather than defendants. With their blessing, I began building what would become the Corporate Integrity Alliance, my legacy beyond just saving my own pension. From crisis comes opportunity. From injustice, sometimes comes reform. The Corporate Integrity Alliance launched 6 months later with a conference that drew attendees from across the country. Whistleblowers, compliance officers, lawyers, and corporate executives gathered to discuss ethical business practices and employee protections. I gave the opening address, sharing my journey from terminated employee to change agent. The standing ovation surprised me. I'd never sought acclaim for doing what I considered right. The highlight of the conference was a panel featuring 5 whistleblowers from different industries, each describing their experiences. Some had faced retaliation, others had been ostracized by colleagues. All had struggled with the decision to speak up. One woman's story particularly resonated with me. She'd been a financial analyst at a pharmaceutical company, fired after questioning research data manipulation. Like me, she'd fought back, gathering evidence, and eventually vindicating herself. The hardest part wasn't the termination, she told the audience. It was the isolation. Everyone abandoned me, afraid of being associated with a troublemaker. I knew that feeling well. The lonely days gathering evidence, uncertain if anyone would believe me. During the conference reception, I spotted a familiar face, Rebecca, now halfway through her forensic accounting program. She was engaged in animated conversation with several compliance professionals. "They've offered me an internship," she exclaimed when I approached. "Starting next summer, working on their financial investigation team." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. "You found your calling." "Because of you," she replied. "You showed me what one determined person can accomplish." As the evening wound down, a reporter approached for an interview. Her questions were thoughtful, focused on the systemic issues rather than personal drama. "What's your advice for companies wanting to prevent fraud?" she asked. "Create systems that reward integrity, not just results," I answered. "And protect those who raise concerns. They're your first line of defense against misconduct." "And for employees who suspect wrongdoing?" I thought carefully before responding. "Document everything. Find allies if possible. Know your rights. And remember that silence only perpetuates the problem." The article appeared the following week, highlighting the Alliance's mission and resources. Calls and emails poured in from employees seeking guidance and companies looking to strengthen their ethics programs. One message particularly touched me. An elderly man writing about his terminated position 3 weeks before retirement. "I thought I was alone," he wrote. "Now I know I'm not, and I'm ready to fight back." I connected him with legal resources in his state, offering encouragement based on my experience. His situation mirrored mine so closely that it reinforced the importance of our work. Balancing my roles at Harrington and the Alliance became challenging. Long days stretched into evenings as I tried to fulfill both responsibilities. The work was meaningful but exhausting. One night, working late at my desk, I received an unexpected visitor, Gerald Harrington. "You're burning the candle at both ends," he observed, settling into a chair across from me. I smiled tiredly. "There's so much to do." "There always is," he agreed. "But even the most important work requires balance." Gerald studied me with concern. "You've accomplished remarkable things this past year, Eleanor. Exposed fraud, rebuilt our compliance systems, launched the Alliance. But at what personal cost?" His question struck home. I'd been so focused on justice and reform that I'd neglected my own needs. No vacations, few social outings, little time for hobbies or relaxation. "I don't want to let anyone down," I admitted. "You won't," Gerald assured me. "But consider this. Your most important contribution isn't working yourself to exhaustion. It's creating sustainable change, and that requires you to be sustainable too." His wisdom resonated. I'd been driving myself relentlessly, perhaps afraid that easing up would somehow diminish the importance of our work. "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "Delegate more. Train others to carry the load. Take time for yourself." Gerald smiled kindly. "The reforms you've implemented will continue without your constant attention. That's how you know they're working." I nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. "I'll try." "Good," Gerald said, standing to leave. "Because you have many more chapters to write, Eleanor, and you'll need your strength for all of them." After he left, I closed my laptop and looked around my office. The framed thank you letters, the ethics award from the business community, the photo of our first Alliance meeting. Evidence of progress, of battles fought and won. Perhaps it was time to remember there was life beyond the fight. Friends to see, books to read, a garden that had been sorely neglected. I gathered my things and left the office earlier than I had in months, feeling lighter with each step. Spring arrived with unexpected opportunities. The Corporate Integrity Alliance had grown rapidly, gaining national attention and corporate sponsors. What had begun as a small resource center was becoming a movement. Major news outlets contacted me for interviews. Universities invited me to speak about business ethics. A publisher suggested I write a book about my experience. The attention was flattering but disorienting. I hadn't sought the spotlight. I'd simply wanted justice and my pension. Now I found myself positioned as an authority on corporate ethics and whistleblower protection. One Wednesday morning, my assistant interrupted a meeting with unexpected news. "There's a call you might want to take. It's from the White House." I excused myself, heart racing. "This is Eleanor Wallace." The caller identified herself as an advisor to the president. "We're forming a commission on corporate accountability and whistleblower protections. The president would like you to serve as a member." I nearly dropped the phone. "Me? Why?" "Your experience provides valuable perspective," she explained, "and your work with the Alliance demonstrates your commitment to systemic reform." I asked for time to consider, though my answer was already forming. This was an opportunity to influence policy at the highest level, to create protections that might have saved me from my own ordeal. That evening, I called James Fletcher to discuss the offer. "It's a tremendous honor," he said. But it will also put you in Daniel's old world. Politics, power struggles, competing agendas. I know, I sighed. Part of me wants to say no, to just focus on the alliance and my work at Harrington. And the other part? Thinks of all the employees who could benefit from stronger protections. All the Daniels who might be stopped before they cause damage. James was quiet for a moment. You know, when I first raised concerns about Daniel's accounting, I was thinking small. Just wanting to fix specific irregularities. I never imagined where it would lead. Neither did I admitted. When I fought for my pension, I wasn't thinking about national policy reform. Yet here you are, James observed. Sometimes our small acts of courage open doors we never expected. The next day, I accepted the commission appointment. The work would require regular trips to Washington, but wouldn't interfere with my role at Harrington or the Alliance. In fact, each position would strengthen the others. Practical experience informing policy, recommendations, policy insights, enhancing our corporate practices. The White House issued a press release announcing the commission members. My phone buzzed constantly with congratulatory messages from colleagues and friends. Margaret, my best friend who had supported me from the beginning, sent champagne to my office. Amid the celebration, Rebecca texted, "Have you seen the financial news? Gray tech whistleblowers got justice." I checked online and found the story. 3 former Gray Tech employees, who had been terminated after reporting irregularities, had won their case. The company was ordered to reinstate them with back pay and implement new compliance protocols. The article quoted one whistleblower. The Corporate Integrity Alliance provided crucial guidance when we felt most alone. Their resources helped us document evidence properly and understand our legal options. Tears pricked my eyes as I read those words. This was why all the long hours, all the stress, all the challenges had been worthwhile. Real people finding justice, just as I had. That weekend, following Gerald's advice about balance, I finally tackled my neglected garden. Kneeling in the soft earth, pulling weeds and planting new flowers, I felt a peacefulness that had eluded me for months. My neighbor stopped by, curious about the White House appointment she'd read about in the local paper. "Did you ever imagine all this would happen when they fired you?" she asked. I sat back on my heels, considering the question. Never. I just wanted what was rightfully mine. "And you ended up changing the whole system," she marveled. Later, watching the sunset from my porch, I reflected on the strange journey of the past year and a half. From terminated employee to national advocate, from fighting for my pension to helping shape national policy. All because I refused to disappear quietly. The Presidential Commission's first meeting took place in a wood-paneled conference room in Washington. Around the table sat corporate leaders, legal experts, former regulators, and union representatives, an intentionally diverse group with sometimes conflicting perspectives. I felt distinctly out of place among such distinguished company until the chairperson opened the session by saying, "We begin with Ms. Wallace's story, which exemplifies why this commission's work matters." Suddenly, my experience wasn't just personal, it was emblematic of systemic problems needing solutions. As I shared my journey from termination to vindication, I watched the impact on these powerful decision-makers. Theory became reality. Statistics became human experience. Our discussions that day were passionate but productive. We identified key areas for potential reform. Strengthening anti-retaliation protections, creating clearer reporting channels, establishing meaningful penalties for companies that punished whistleblowers. Between commission meetings, my work at Harrington continued to evolve. We had implemented all our planned reforms, and were now focused on fine-tuning and maintaining our ethical culture. The compliance department I had built functioned smoothly, allowing me to focus on strategic initiatives. One such initiative involved employee pensions. Appropriately enough, given my own experience. Working with our benefits team, I developed enhanced protections for retirement funds, ensuring no future executive could manipulate the system, as Daniel had. The board approved these changes unanimously, with one member commenting, "This addresses a vulnerability we might never have identified without Ms. Wallace's unique perspective." As summer turned to fall, unexpected news arrived from the prison where Daniel was serving his sentence. He had been diagnosed with aggressive cancer, and his attorneys were requesting compassionate release. The news stirred complicated emotions. I had long ago moved past wanting revenge, focusing instead on reform. But the prospect of Daniel receiving leniency troubled me, given the magnitude of his crimes and the lives he had damaged. I discussed it with James over coffee. He stole millions and showed no remorse, James argued. Why should he get special treatment now? Because compassion doesn't depend on the recipient deserving it, I replied, surprising myself with the response. It reflects who we are, not who they are. James studied me curiously. You've changed, Eleanor. A year ago you might not have said that. He was right. My focus had shifted from Daniel to the systems that enabled him, and to my own capacity to create positive change. Daniel seemed increasingly irrelevant to the story I was now living. The judge ultimately approved a modified release, allowing Daniel to receive treatment at a secure medical facility rather than prison. The news barely registered in my busy schedule of commission work, alliance activities, and Harrington responsibilities. More meaningful was a letter I received that same week from a young compliance officer in Texas. She described using our alliance resources to address financial irregularities at her company, successfully preventing a major fraud before it occurred. I faced significant pressure to look the other way, she wrote. Your story gave me courage to stand firm. Each such letter reinforced that our work was making tangible differences. The Commission's policy recommendations would take time to implement, but grassroots change was happening every day through individual acts of integrity. At our third Commission meeting, I presented research from the Alliance tracking whistleblower experiences across different industries. The patterns were clear. Certain sectors had particularly poor protections, while others had developed effective safeguards worth replicating broadly. What makes the difference? Asked another Commission member. Leadership commitment, I answered without hesitation. When executives value ethical behavior above short-term profits, the entire culture shifts. After the meeting, the Commission chair pulled me aside. You've become our moral compass, Eleanor, keeping us focused on real people, not just abstract policies. I smiled, thinking how unlikely that would have seemed 18 months earlier, when I sat shell-shocked in my living room after being terminated. That evening, in my hotel room, I video-called Gerald to update him on the Commission's progress. You've found your calling, he observed. Fighting for your pension opened a door to something much larger. It's strange how things unfold, I agreed. If Daniel hadn't targeted me specifically, none of this would have happened. Gerald chuckled. His worst mistake wasn't the fraud, it was choosing you as an enemy. I laughed at that characterization, though it wasn't quite right. I hadn't set out to be Daniel's enemy, just to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The wider impact had grown organically from that simple, personal goal. Sometimes the most powerful changes begin with one person saying, enough. 24 months to the day after my termination, I stood before a congressional committee, testifying in support of the Corporate Accountability Act, legislation shaped by our Commission's recommendations. The bill before you today would protect millions of American workers, I explained to the assembled legislators. It would strengthen whistleblower safeguards, increase penalties for retaliation, and create clearer reporting channels for those who witness misconduct. The questions that followed were probing but respectful. Both Democratic and Republican members seemed genuinely concerned about the issues our Commission had identified. In an era of partisan division, corporate ethics had emerged as a rare area of potential consensus. As I left the Capitol, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Former Harrington CFO James Fletcher, named to Federal Financial Oversight Board. I smiled at this latest development. James had moved from behind-the-scenes whistleblower to public watchdog, his expertise now recognized at the highest levels. Another life transformed by standing up for what was right. Back at my hotel, I found an invitation waiting. The White House Correspondents' Dinner, one of Washington's premier events. 2 years ago, I could never have imagined moving in such circles. Now it seemed almost normal. I called Margaret to share the news. From fired employee to hobnobbing with the political elite, she laughed. What a journey! Sometimes I hardly recognize my life, I admitted. It's so far from the retirement I'd planned. Are you disappointed? Margaret asked, I considered the question honestly. No, this path has meaning I never expected. It's harder in some ways, but also more fulfilling. The next morning, before flying home, I visited the National Portrait Gallery, seeking a brief respite from meetings and policy discussions. Wandering through quiet halls filled with images of Americans who had shaped history, I reflected on the power of individual action. So many consequential changes had begun with one person refusing to accept injustice, one voice raising concerns, one stand against wrongdoing. My phone interrupted these reflections. A call from Melissa at Harrington. "Eleanor, I thought you should know. Daniel Winters passed away last night." The news hit me with unexpected force. Daniel, the architect of so much harm, was gone. The man who had tried to destroy my financial security no longer existed. "Are you okay?" Melissa asked after my lengthy silence. "Yes," I said, finding my voice. "It's just the end of a chapter, I suppose." After hanging up, I sat on a museum bench, processing my complicated emotions. I felt no joy at Daniel's death, no sense of triumph or vindication, only a certain hollowness, a recognition of the ultimate futility of his greed and deception. What remained of Daniel's legacy? Not the wealth he'd accumulated. That had been confiscated. Not professional success, his reputation was irreparably damaged. Only the harm he'd caused, and the reforms that had emerged in response to his actions. I thought of something Gerald had once said. True success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you contribute. By that standard, Daniel's life had been a failure. But from that failure had come unexpected positive change, stronger corporate governance, better whistleblower protections, the Alliance helping others find justice. Flying home that afternoon, I gazed out the airplane window at the patchwork landscape below. My thoughts turned from Daniel to the future. Commission recommendations moving toward implementation, Alliance programs expanding nationally, new corporate partners adopting our ethics frameworks. The work continued, with or without Daniel. That, perhaps, was the most fitting epitaph for the man who had inadvertently launched me on this unexpected journey. When I landed, I had a text from Rebecca. "Saw the news about Daniel. How are you feeling?" I considered my answer carefully. Reflective. His actions changed many lives, including mine, but not in the ways he intended. There's a lesson there. Rebecca responded, "The best revenge is living well?" "Not revenge," I texted back. "Redemption. Taking something broken and building something better from it." That evening, I gazed at the small garden I'd planted on Gerald's advice about balance. The flowers were blooming vigorously, transforming what had been bare earth into a vibrant display of color and life. A fitting metaphor, I thought, for what had grown from the painful soil of injustice. 3 years after my termination, the Corporate Integrity Alliance had expanded beyond my wildest expectations. With offices in 5 cities and partnerships with major corporations, universities, and government agencies, we were helping thousands of employees navigate ethical challenges. My book, Speaking Truth, A Whistleblower's Journey, had become required reading in business ethics courses. The Corporate Accountability Act had passed with bipartisan support, strengthening protections nationwide. At Harrington Financial, our compliance systems were cited as industry best practices. The company's reputation had fully recovered, with ethics awards replacing scandal headlines. I was still officially Chief Compliance Officer, but increasingly my role was symbolic rather than operational. The excellent team I'd built handled day-to-day responsibilities, allowing me to focus on broader advocacy work. One autumn morning, Gerald invited me to lunch at his country club. He looked remarkably spry for 86, still sharp and engaged. "I've been thinking about your future," he said as we settled at his favorite table. "You've accomplished everything I could have hoped for at Harrington. Maybe it's time to consider your next chapter." I'd been having similar thoughts. "What do you have in mind?" "The Alliance needs a full-time leader," Gerald observed. "Your divided attention served its early growth, but now it requires more focus." He was right. I'd been stretching myself between too many roles, none getting my full attention. "But Harrington still needs a strong compliance presence," I countered. Gerald smiled. "Abigail Chen is ready. She's learned from the best." I couldn't argue with that assessment. Abigail had grown tremendously under my mentorship, developing both technical expertise and ethical leadership. You've built systems that will outlast any individual, Gerald continued. That's true success, creating something that continues without you. The idea was both frightening and liberating. Stepping away from Harrington would mean leaving the security of a traditional corporate role, but it would also allow me to expand the Alliance's impact nationally. I'll think about it, I promised. The decision crystallized a week later during a crisis at another company. A pharmaceutical firm's employee had been terminated after reporting safety concerns about a new medication. The Alliance was providing guidance, but we were stretched thin with similar cases across the country. We need more resources, Rebecca observed during our strategy call. She was now our lead forensic specialist, having completed her accounting program with honors. More staff, more regional presence. That requires more funding, more organizational development, I replied. Which requires more leadership bandwidth, Rebecca concluded pointedly. She was right. The Alliance had grown beyond what part-time leadership could support. If we truly wanted to help whistleblowers nationwide, someone needed to commit fully to building the organization. That someone, I realized, was me. The next day, I requested a meeting with the Harrington board to discuss transition planning. They were understanding but reluctant to lose me. You've been the cornerstone of our ethical culture, the chairman said. How do we replace that? You don't need to, I assured them. The culture is established. The systems are strong. Abigail is ready to lead compliance forward. We agreed on a 6-month transition period, allowing for smooth handover of responsibilities. I would remain an advisor to the board on ethics matters, maintaining a connection to the company that had been central to my career. With that decision made, I focused on expanding the Alliance. We secured major foundation funding, hired additional staff, and developed new programs supporting whistleblowers through legal, financial, and emotional challenges. My last day at Harrington was marked by a surprisingly emotional ceremony. Colleagues shared stories of how our ethics reforms had changed their experience of the workplace. The board presented me with a plaque commemorating my contributions. Gerald, ever the mentor, gifted me a compass with a note reading, "You've always known true north." Cleaning out my office, I found the cardboard box I'd carried out 3 years earlier after my termination. I'd kept it as a reminder of that painful day. Now it seemed like an artifact from another lifetime, relevant to my story, but no longer defining it. As I walked through the lobby one final time, Abigail fell into step beside me. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Following you isn't easy," I smiled reassuringly. "You'll do it differently. That's good. Every leader brings their own perspective." At the door, I turned for one last look at the building where I'd spent most of my professional life. So much had changed. The company I was leaving was fundamentally different from the one that had once discourated me so callously. "I'll miss this place," I said softly. Abigail squeezed my arm. "This place will always reflect your influence. That doesn't change when you walk out the door." Outside, the autumn sun warmed my face as I stepped into my new future. Not the retirement I'd once planned, but something more meaningful than I could have imagined. Sometimes endings are really beginnings in disguise. 5 years after my termination, I stood at the podium of a university auditorium, addressing graduating business students. The dean had invited me to deliver the commencement address, hoping my story would inspire these future leaders. "Your careers will present moments of choice," I told them. "Situations where the easy path diverges from the right one. In those moments, remember that integrity isn't just a personal virtue. It's a professional responsibility." Looking out at those young faces, I wondered how many would encounter their own Daniels. How many would face pressure to compromise their values for profit or advancement. I hoped our work had created a world where they would find more support than I initially had. After the ceremony, students gathered around me, asking questions about whistleblower protections and ethical leadership. One young woman waited until the others had dispersed. "My mother lost her job for reporting safety violations," she said quietly. "Your alliance helped her win her case. She's the reason I decided to study business ethics." These moments, learning how our work rippled outward in ways I couldn't predict, sustained me through the challenges of building the Alliance nationally. Those challenges were substantial. Despite legislative improvements, corporate resistance to meaningful whistleblower protections remained strong. For every company that embraced ethical reforms, others fought to maintain the status quo. The alliance had grown to 25 employees across 7 offices, with volunteer networks in every state. We provided legal referrals, emotional support groups, and financial bridge assistance for whistleblowers facing retaliation. Our educational programs reached thousands of employees and executives annually. James Fletcher, now a respected voice in financial regulation, served on our advisory board alongside other reformed corporate leaders. Rebecca headed our forensic investigation unit, training professionals to document misconduct effectively. My role had evolved from direct case management to public advocacy, testifying before legislative committees, consulting with regulatory agencies, speaking at industry conferences. My personal story opened doors that statistics and policy arguments could not. One rainy Tuesday, I received an unexpected visitor at our Washington office. Caroline Winters, Daniel's widow. I hadn't seen her since our meeting years earlier. "I've been following your work," she said after we exchanged greetings. "The Alliance is making a real difference." "We're trying," I acknowledged. "There's still so much more to do." Caroline nodded, then revealed the purpose of her visit. "I've established a foundation with what remains of my personal assets. I'd like to support the Alliance's work." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Funds connected to Daniel, who had tried to destroy my financial security, now potentially supporting an organization born from that very attempt. "Why?" I asked directly. "Because changing systems matters more than punishing individuals," she replied. "Daniel can't be redeemed, but perhaps some good can come from what happened." I accepted her contribution with mixed emotions. The money would help expand our programs, but it also represented a strange closing of the circle that had begun with my termination. That evening, I called Gerald to share this unexpected development. Though retired from active business involvement, he remained my most trusted advisor. "Life writes stories we could never imagine," he observed. "Daniel tried to take your pension. Now his money helps others protect theirs." "Is it wrong to accept it?" I questioned. "Given everything that happened?" "No," Gerald said firmly. "It's perfect justice. Money that once fueled greed now supports integrity. I can't think of a more fitting outcome." The next day, I walked through our busy office, watching staff counsel whistleblowers, draft educational materials, and coordinate legal resources. The Alliance had become exactly what I'd hoped, a lifeline for those facing situations similar to mine. In my private office, I kept few mementos of the past. My termination notice, framed as a reminder of where this journey began. The compass Gerald had given me. A photo of the original Alliance founding team, and in my desk drawer, that first thank you letter from a reinstated pension recipient. "You fought not just for yourself, but for all of us who couldn't fight back." That remained the essence of our mission and my personal purpose, ensuring that others would not have to fight alone as I once had. The path from wronged employee to national advocate had been neither straight nor easy. But looking back, I wouldn't have changed it. Every challenge, every setback, every small victory had shaped both the Alliance and the person I had become. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to what you were meant to do. 10 years after my termination, I stood in the Rose Garden of the White House. The president was signing the Enhanced Corporate Accountability Act, legislation that significantly strengthened the original protections we'd fought for years earlier. As one of the key advocates who had shaped the bill, I had been invited to witness this milestone. Looking around at the assembled dignitaries, legislators, regulators, corporate leaders, and fellow advocates, I marveled at how far the movement for corporate accountability had come. The president acknowledged me by name during remarks, citing my journey from wronged employee to national reformer. The recognition was gratifying, but what moved me most was knowing how many people would benefit from these enhanced protections. After the ceremony, I chatted briefly with the new chair of the SEC, a former prosecutor who had helped build cases against corporate fraudsters like Daniel. "Your Alliance's documentation protocols have transformed how we approach whistleblower evidence," she told me. "We're getting stronger cases that actually stick." This practical impact mattered more than any personal accolades. The Alliance now operated nationally with specialized programs for healthcare, finance, technology, and manufacturing sectors. Our staff of 40 worked alongside hundreds of volunteer professionals, providing pro bono support. Beyond direct whistleblower assistance, we had developed corporate certification programs, helping companies build ethical cultures proactively. Harrington Financial, under Abigail Chen's leadership, remained our showcase example of corporate transformation. Gerald Harrington had passed away 2 years earlier at 89, leaving a substantial bequest to fund Alliance scholarships for ethics studies. His funeral had drawn business leaders from across the country, all touched by his vision of corporate responsibility. As I left the White House that evening, spring flowers blooming along the pathways, I reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought me here, from seeking simply to restore my own pension to building a national movement for corporate integrity. Rebecca met me for dinner at a restaurant near our hotel. Now serving as the Alliance's executive director while I focused on advocacy, she had grown into a formidable leader in her own right. "I saw the ceremony on television," she said enthusiastically. "Your hard work made this happen." "Our hard work," I corrected, and that of every whistleblower who had the courage to speak up. We toasted to the new legislation, to Gerald's memory, and to the continued growth of the Alliance. As we talked about future plans, expanding international partnerships, developing new educational programs, I felt profound gratitude for this unexpected path. "Did you ever imagine all this?" Rebecca asked, echoing my thoughts. "When you were first fired?" I laughed softly. "Never. I just wanted my pension. I wanted justice for myself. And instead, you created justice for thousands." The next morning, before flying home, I visited Arlington National Cemetery. Tom was buried there, having served in the military before his corporate career. I hadn't expected to spend my retirement years without him, building a national organization instead of traveling together as we'd planned. Standing by his grave, I spoke softly about the day's events, the legislation, the ongoing work of the Alliance. Though he'd been gone 13 years, these one-sided conversations remained important to me. "I think you would have been proud," I concluded, "not of the recognition, but of the purpose, of using what happened to help others." Returning to Alliance headquarters, I found an email waiting from James Fletcher. Now officially retired but still active on our advisory board, he had been tracking a situation at a major bank where employees were reporting pressure to ignore compliance protocols. "Sounds familiar, doesn't it?" he wrote. "Some battles need fighting over and over." He was right. Despite all our progress, the underlying issues persisted. Greed, power, the temptation to prioritize profit over people. Our work would never truly be finished, yet each victory mattered. Each whistleblower protected, each company reformed, each policy improved, represented real progress. Together, they were changing the landscape of American business. That evening, at home in my garden, I watched the sunset and reflected on the full circle of my journey. From the shock and humiliation of termination to the quiet satisfaction of meaningful work. From fighting for my own pension to creating systems that protected others' security and dignity. Daniel had intended my termination to silence me. Instead, it had given me a voice that reached further than either of us could have imagined. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing you do. In trying to take what was mine, Daniel had inadvertently helped me discover something more valuable. Not just a secure retirement, but a purpose that had transformed pain into progress, anger into advocacy, and personal injustice into systemic change. I had gotten much more than my pension back. I had found my calling.